Islam. No one continuously asks Americans to apologize for the millions of people that have died as a response to the foreign policy that has taken place, either clandestine or through direct military intervention into other states. No one asked that. No one. When I was traveling, no one, not at one time, said, "Do you apologize for America's role around the world?" Nobody asked that. However, they ask that all the time. Media has a tendency, and not just media, cultural narrow-mindedness sometimes has a tendency to affect how people converse. And they think they're being novel, when for the most part, they just ask the same thing that other people of that particular culture ask constantly. The thing with a side that they keep hitting her with, that's media trying to ding her. That's not media caring about the answer. They've asked her that question 1,000 times. And every time she goes to a particular outlet, they ask her that question again. They ask her that question not because they care about the answer to that question. They ask her to that question because they want to associate her with Assad. That's it. Media does that. But that's not what I'm doing. Nor is that my perspective here. My perspective is more along the lines of, I have no fucking clue what Tulsi Gabbard will say to a question on this issue. It's not me asking her a question that I already know an answer to, but I'm just badgering her with a question. That's not what I mean. When I say pin down, maybe I need to change the verbiage because pin down may come across a particular way. But she just needs, I don't think I used the term pin down. Oh, I said she must be asked. Yeah, she must be asked. Yeah, she should be asked. Meaning, instead of badgering her with this nonsense about Assad, or instead of badgering her about, hey, do you still hate gays? Instead of doing that nonsense, which they do on all of her interviews, ask her about what's taking place in India. I mean, fuck's sake. She's a foreign policy candidate. Oh, no, Anthony, I didn't take it as a slight. I took it just as a conversation. And I wanted to explain myself. I don't want to be misunderstood. That's all. If Tulsi, I think, is unfairly covered. Often. I think it's grossly unfair, if I'm being honest. When she went after Kamala Harris, the way the media responded was atrocious. It's outright atrocious. My fascination with her, I think to some degree, honestly, has to do with fascination towards military stuff. I am a sucker for military history. And not just military history, tactics, strategy, the thinking, the mindset, this very specific focus on an objective. Most things in life, you can't focus on one objective. Most things in life, you have all sorts of things that you have to take into account. You have to take in people's feelings, how the world is, how laws, all that stuff. You have to work between the lines, for the most part, in most situations in life. War becomes a very specific thing that you are trying to accomplish, even though you might have all of these other things on the sidelines. It is very specific in what you want to do. You may get your strategy wrong, you may have your tactics wrong, you may misunderstand your enemy and everything else, but at the very least, you have a very clear fucking objective on what you're trying to do. It's fascinating to me. And by the way, your world, your literal world, the world to which you inhabit today, comes directly out of World War I. That war is a forgotten war, but your world is literally crafted and created by it. It's fucking astonishing. Kashmir, the thing that we're talking about now. Thanks, Britain. Good looking out for that one. Hong Kong, the story I did earlier. Thanks, Britain. Good looking out for that one. We can keep going down the line. The masters of the universe, the white man's burden. We gotta, civilize these organizations. We have to civilize these countries. We also need to take that land and we need to rely on them for labor and for military force and all this other stuff. The world is out of World War I. You don't like the Soviet Union? You hate what Stalin did? Hey, thanks, World War I. It's fucking astonishing. My point is this. She's made her candidacy about the military as an absolute. Everything else is subordinate to her military thing. That's been her thing. Sanders has his health care, Medicare for all, eventually came that, but essentially the domestic stuff. Elizabeth Warren has the domestic stuff. That's how they're known. That's their moniker. And in her case, hers was military. She was the only candidate that had military as her thing. And she was the only candidate that came out with the balls of saying we need to cut back on the way we use our military. She was a weirdo in the sense. And talking about it from the context of Democratic Party, Republican Party, and the dogma that takes place in our politics. That's a fascinating character in our political space. And if the only thing that you're ever going to ask her about is a side, missing out. God, you're missing out. That's why I get enamored when I ask these questions, because my thought is somebody has to ask this. Somebody has to ask this. That's where it's coming from. It's not coming from Tulsi needs to be pinned down on this. It's coming from this is a fascinating area of topic of discussion. And she is a Hindu. She has a connection to Modi in the sense of and you could say is in religious leanings of sorts. I would be curious, whatever she says, not that she has to say anything in particular, whatever she says on this topic will be fascinating. I noted in the video that she's off doing military service right now, so for the most part, she would have a hard time doing anything or saying anything. But I would love to get one of those little snapshot videos that she continuously does on this very specific issue wherever she comes down on this particular issue. I am fascinated and I'm curious on it. We're talking about her foreign policy choices, right? She's going to be president of the United States, right? She would have to make decisions on issues just like this. Why wouldn't you want to know? And by the way, not just her, Sanders. Yes, I would like to hear Sanders talk about it. I would like to hear all of the candidates talk about it. Not just her. But just like if I was talking about a candidate that was African, that was running in the race, that would have somewhat of a tether, meaning a closeness to the thing to which we're talking about, yes, she would be a fascinating person to talk about this with. If something was going on in the African-American community, I don't know, Bill Cosby gets locked up or something, that's not really an African-American thing, but if something was going on in the black community and someone says, you have a panel and everybody's white, and people would think that's weird, you had a panel with everybody white. Why? Because the closeness to the issue is by the people who are affected by the issue. She's Hindu. The closeness to the issue kind of forces the conversation in and of itself, or at the very least creates, I would have said, potential energy when asking her that, or a potential. And I mean, it's almost like an electrical sense of lightning between the ground. I just mean, it has to be asked. It has to be asked. It should be asked. It should be asked. It should be asked. 1,000 times that question should be asked. So I'll end this here, but I didn't want this to come across as if, I'm trying to pin her down on this particular question. No, I want to ask her a lot of politics. Like, for example, if you are talking about pulling out, meaning I'm going to pull back from the standpoint of American foreign policy and I'm going to interact with our allies instead of these regime change wars, what is going to be the response of the other nations when you do that? Now, whatever the response is, pulling back to some degree, I would argue is something you have to do regardless. The response, taking out right, wrong, good, bad, and just looking at the response as an action and consequence thing, what do you think the action and consequence is going to be for places like Russia and China, et cetera, et cetera? I'm fascinated by those answers. Because, look, just because you do something good doesn't mean the good always follows from the good thing that you do. We're talking about, there's no cosmic God that instantiates that things have to be right or have to be good. Your pulling back doesn't necessarily mean that the world is going to be flowers and rainbows when you pull back. That is by no means saying that you should stay forever. I am talking about just bare bones, flat fact. The world is the world is the world. And countries act the way they do. Tulsi Gabbard is a fascinating person to have a discussion with. And unfortunately, our mainstream media has dropped the ball magnificently so. The Kashmir question should be a question among many. And by the way, it should be asked among all the candidates, so don't misunderstand me. My point in this, though, is she has a certain closeness to this that the other candidates don't. Just on heritage stuff. That's all. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. I don't think it's an unfair thing to say. The same could be said of Sanders if it weren't For his track record of caving in crunch time, his rhetoric seems empty to me, although I'm sure he means it. Yeah, he does mean it. Well, he can't be empty if he doesn't mean it. Saying it's empty would imply that he doesn't mean it. You can't have empty rhetoric and the person doesn't mean it. If the person means it, they mean it. I think your point is, it's not that the rhetoric is empty, it's more so you don't believe it's ineffectual in the sense that he can deliver on it. Whether a person can entirely individually deliver on something is less important to me than whether the person actually means it. If the person means it, they get up in the morning, they go to bed at night, they can find all sorts of avenues and ways in which they try to affect their agenda. If they don't mean it, you can't even get to that point. I hope you understand my point. That's dramatically important. It's not just it's not as, it's not just, well, it's empty because he can't affect it. I don't think that matters. Kamala is closer to this than Tulsi. Hey, that's a good point. That is a good point. That's a good point. But Kamala Harris didn't make foreign policy her mainstay. Kamala Harris didn't make it her mainstay. And by the way, Kamala Harris is now pretending to be black. So from the stamp, look, I know this sounds really fucked up, but Kamala Harris, at one point they were calling her like Indian or something, and she was going with it. So yeah, I feel you, but at this point she's trying to be black. So to her, this is not, neither here nor there for her. But by the way, it would be interesting for them to answer this question. That would be fascinating for them to answer. Because you're right, Kamala Harris's heritage does lend itself to this in a very interesting way. That's a good point. That's a really good point. God, she had been pretending to be black so hard, even got me confused. Even confused me. All right. I'm going to end this. I hope, I'm going to call this the after show. Jamal, what's the current black voter support? Mine? I don't think I have a huge black voter support. Oh, for Kamala. That, I don't know. That's an interesting point. So it seems like Joe Biden is getting like the mainstay of the black vote. Sanders is, I noticed, babe, it's funny. I was looking at the polling earlier today because I was going to do a video on it. Sanders is getting, like, a large share of Sanders support is without a college degree, non-white, like either Hispanic or black. It's fascinating because it flies entirely in the face of what they've said about him, that he only gets whites and all this other stuff. Elizabeth Warren gets the white woman college vote, like the college-educated white woman vote. She gets that in spades. I guess, they're it's kind of like blacks voting for Obama in a sense. They're voting for somebody who they believe is just like them. Not to mention, I'm not saying that this goes entirely beyond policy. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that there's an uptick when the person idolizes you. But I don't think she's getting them spades. Like after she went after Biden, for example, in the last poll I saw, Biden's number 2 was Sanders. Warren's number 2 was Sanders. Sanders' number 2 was Biden. So if she was consolidating the black vote, that wouldn't be true, especially not in the Democratic primary. So, I have family members that unfortunately have fell for that shtick, but they don't pay attention to politics like I talked about, and unfortunately for them, they don't watch my show. They would know better. But I can't entirely answer that. I would say that she's not getting it, though. She's not getting it. Not based on the polling. Not based on the polling. Is there any truth to Kamala's family being slave owners? I don't know. That's a little strong. I don't know. I remember it was like her dad or something like that. Her dad was pissed off at her, like, repudiating her African heritage or something. But I gotta be honest, I don't know. Prepare to be labeled Hindu-phobic if you dare to ask about Modi and Kashmir. They can call me whatever they want. I don't give a shit about the labels. It is what it is. Look, if I am being truthful, say whatever you want. Like, Hindu-phobic my ass. If you revoke, like, If you roll in troops, kill access to all this other stuff, you're not being, hindered for calling it out. You're just calling it what it is. That looks bad. You're revoking autonomy to a particular region, and you're doing so in a heavy-handed way. Not to mention potential atrocity that's being committed while that place is cut off from the outside world. So, I people could call you whatever they want. I care more about what's real in this case. All right, I'm going to call this the after show. I'm calling this the after show. And I hope that I made my my opinion and where I'm coming from on this a little bit clearer. But all the candidates should be asked. So that's a fair point. But I still say the closer you are to something, the more interesting your perspective is sometimes, I think. And I don't know why that wouldn't be true for this. I suppose that some people are insecure because of all the attacks that have been labeled at her with Modi stuff. But at this point, certainly, this audience knows that's not where I'm coming from. JT, you missed a good time in the JD show in New York City. Did I? Krillin, you went. You had the opportunity to go. That's cool. I heard a little bit about it, but you can't just pick up and ride to New York. It's like a 7-hour trip. But I'm glad you guys have fun. I did a show for Door, believe it or not. I did a show for Door. Door, I did a show, I think it was on, what was it? Oh, I know what it was. It was something about Yang. It was Yang. I did a show on Yang. And I kind of made the point that Door's critique of Yang in this was wrong. That Yang was right. That Yang was saying something that sometimes the left ignores and goes into this kind of weird propaganda thing in order to cover up. In order to cover the attacks from the right. Whereas, just be fucking honest. Sometimes just be honest. Look, if you pay some people $15 an hour minimum wage, companies do whatever they can to save a nickel. If they can save a nickel, they will save a nickel. If that means firing somebody to save that nickel, they will do so. The left typically believes that. They believe that across the board. They even make the argument that says, look, those trade deals has allowed companies to ship their jobs to like China or Pakistan or India or whatever. They pay those people like $2 or $3 an hour and then ship the products back into the country without any kind of tariffs or taxes and fire the American worker and funneling the profits to the top. That's true. That makes all the sense in the world. It is that company's job to make as much money as they possibly can make. And if they can do so by firing the American workers, they will do just that. If that is true in that case, why is it not true in the cases where you're talking about fast food and you increase the minimum wage, let's say to $15 an hour, and a burger making machine comes out and they say, hey, that burger making machine goes from about $14.90. I can get rid of that worker, put in that burger making machine, and bam, we can save money. And so as the minimum wage increases, that burger machine will just be there. That burger machine won't get blue, it won't get cold, it won't get tired, it won't bitch about kids, it won't do any of that stuff. It will just spit out burgers in the way that the person wants them. McDonald's is moving towards that, by the way, if they get the opportunity. Look at, if you go to McDonald's today, you have the panels. That way they can essentially speed up the line, but at some point that panel is not going to have another person at the end. They're going to start cutting down those people. When you go into one of the stores, let's say like a grocery store, and that's even if you go to grocery stores, because now you can get your groceries delivered to your house. What do you see? They're checkout counters that don't have people associated with it. You just go in, it automatically does it. A line that would have typically taken 6 or 7 people to bag and man and everything else now has like 1. That is going to happen across the board. And that happens because at the point where the machine gets cheaper than the person, that company that has just as much, the corporate thing of trying to maximize its profit, and the same argument that is made where they would ship a job overseas, the same argument applies to in the country itself. If it can get a machine to do a job cheaper than a person, it will get a machine, it will put it in, and it will fire that person, it will save that nickel. The same thing is true, by the way, when you're talking about fast food and anything else. The catch becomes, what is the cost of the worker versus what is the cost of the machine? And in that conversation, Dore was browbeating Yang, saying, that sounds like a right-wing argument. That sounds like a right-wing argument. As if, just because it sounds like a right-wing argument, that it's false. Well, it's nonsense to believe that everything that the right wing says is false. In that very specific case, depending upon the line that you're going at, it could be true. Why wouldn't it be? The same argument is made for when they ship jobless overseas. Why wouldn't the same argument be made for internal dealing with computers or dealing with robots? That shouldn't stop you on the left from pushing for people to get higher wages. It's just an awareness of fucking reality. I get into this thing where I do a video where I gotta make that point. I'm not hitting Dore hard in the video. I just gotta make the point. Like, hey, this is, Yang was right here. Dore's wrong. Dore brings me on a show. Now, this is the only invitation I've ever had to Dore's show. And he brings me on a show to argue about something where I'm entirely right about. And I'm like, you're going to lose this argument. You're going to lose this argument bad. Because I am right as a flat fact right. I am infinitely right. And if you're going to bring me on your show for this, you're going to lose this. Be certain. If you want to bring me on your show just to bring me on your show, fair enough. But if you want to bring me on your show to debate this, you are going to lose. Now, I get on the show, and this is my after show, so fuck it. I get on the show, and I'm told, they're like, look, don't, just keep this to yourself. It's like, what do you mean keep it? It's like, are you going to show the video or not? And it's like, and he tells me that to make him look bad. Now, I think he's joking about this, but I couldn't tell if he was entirely joking or not. And so we go into the thing, and he does, we start talking about it, and he says, and as we're talking about it, and he's going through and he's making his point. And if I'm not mistaken, I was told that if this goes bad, this video is never going to be seen. I thought he was fucking around about that. I thought he was joking about that. And we're talking, and he goes on his rant. Fair enough. Do your thing. And I make my point to him, and I even make the point that, dude, it's in the video where I say all of this, and it's like your rant misses this, and this. That just because the right wing says something and attack a very particular point doesn't mean that the point is wrong. It just means that the point needs more context. Sometimes context is harder to defend, in which case the left just pretends as if it's not real. They did that with the healthcare thing. Obamacare became universal healthcare, as opposed to, it's universal healthcare, but 30 million people are still without healthcare. Why? They did that because it's harder to defend if you have to do a piecemeal explanation in regards to context. Context is harder to explain. It is easier to defend in kind of general terms. But I explained my case. And he says, to be honest, I didn't watch your whole video. I'm like, I told you should have watched that video before you brought me on, because you weren't going to win that argument. Look, I am a lone wolf when I do my shows, and I don't have connections like talking about with the other hosts or whatever. And I don't necessarily look for them or seek them out. I like many of these shows. I don't get the opportunity to see them as much these days because, I do my own show. But that video took about 30 minutes. That video got buried. That video never saw the light of day. When he said, if this goes wrong for me, you're never going to see this video, he wasn't fucking around. He was right. He was right. Garnome, Jimmy might be getting a bit of a swelled ego. Hopefully that trend doesn't continue. So I don't know if it's an ego or if it's business. It's business. Like I don't say that as a negative. That's not. Sometimes some of the hardest things to explain is that like some things that you say are just are, and people consider them to be loaded words, and sometimes they're not loaded. They just are. It is what it is, just by virtue of what you do. He is in a business. He does a show. In pursuit of doing that show, he is attacked relentlessly by an egomaniac and all around just asshole, Sam Cedar. Sam Cedars oozes with smugness. It's disgusting. I don't know how people go around him. It's like this person has a stench. I would imagine that the work wife just kind of deals with the stench because he's probably terrified of Sam Cedar. It's like, Their smugness is getting, what did you say to me? Sorry. Don't hit me, Sam. Don't hit me. Don't hit me, Sam. But the smugness is utterly disgusting. I'm sorry. I mean, whatever Sam has to say gets kind of ensconced in the smugness. It just gets swell. I understand some people might like that. I find it utterly disgusting. And it takes away from the stuff. Especially when you're hitting somebody that's on the left. Sam Cedar had a video one time where he was talking about lemonade stands. And he makes this, and Luca gave me this video. And Cedar, in this video, essentially says, well, I have a business. And Jimmy Dore has a business. And let's say they're like lemonade stands. And he has a brand of lemonade that's doing better than my brand of lemonade. And goes into this thing about how you have to attack the other brand of lemonade or some stupid shit like this. This is not brands of lemonades. These guys are doing shows. And these are businesses to them. I think all of them would say that they are businesses. And like any other business, doesn't matter what the business is. What do? You maximize your profit. Do you believe that changes just because these guys are on the left? It does not. It does not. 1,000 times it doesn't. When Sam Cedar is begging for money and then turns around and attacks Jimmy Dore for doing the show and getting paid for doing the show. Yeah, that's hypocrisy. His audience is okay with that hypocrisy because they're just like Sam Cedar and it's on their wavelength. It's utterly disgusting. I'm sorry. But they're doing the show. So you're stuck in the same situation of anything that adversely affects my show, adversely affects my ability to feed myself, clothe myself, have a roof over my head, etc., etc., etc. Is what it is. You can say it's good, bad, or whatever you want to call it. It is what it is. All shows, to some degree, have that to varying degrees. And I would imagine when your life depends on it, you get kind of protective of the thing that your life depends on. When Tim Black flipped out because I called his interview with Sam Cedar tepid, there were other names I could have called it. Tepid was the best that I could come up with, and that's the best thing that I could come up with that particular topic because how atrocious and how bad Sam Cedar beat the stuffing out of him. Why did he flip out? Because it's under attack. The shit that he uses to feed and clothe himself, to some degree, somebody's saying something bad about it. We go after political leaders saying, oh, that guy was thin-skinned, that guy was thin-skinned. Fact of the matter is those guys have certain businesses and interests that they care about, and criticism, especially loud criticism, can hurt the business. That's just the truth, man. I mean, it's what it is. Lainey Peterson, thank you so much for you do. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Lainey. Minimum wage should be regional, disagree with national. Oh, I see what you mean, Krillin, because your thing is you have different areas that have different living standards. So like Georgia has a lower living standard than, say, California. And so a house, if you're making $80,000 a year in California, you might be poor. If you're making $80,000 a year in Georgia, you are fucking high on the hog because of real estate and everything else being cheaper. I think that's your point. I feel you. I don't know if I entirely agree with it, but I feel you. I feel you. I think there's a sweet spot in the minimum wage. That aspect where it doesn't hurt the business and the person thing. $7 is obscene. I'm sorry, $7 is obscene. And when Trump was running around telling me he was going to get $10 an hour and people loved it, and then he gets in office and his own party, the right wing, the Trumpsters, don't hold him accountable in the least. They just let it slide by like it was nothing. Let it slide like it was nothing. Lainey Peterson, one size does not fit all. I get the argument. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But can we just agree that it needs to go up? Can we just please agree to that? Yeah, can we agree to that? And it's not so much one size fit all thing. I mean, you can make the argument about any of the minimum wage laws, right? Like you could say $7.25. Yeah, one size doesn't fit all. Got to get rid of that. That's problematic. I mean, you do need a low bar because otherwise companies are going to be shooting for the low bar. If you have no federal minimum wage laws, what I would guarantee you is the state minimum wage laws in some of these places wouldn't be what they are. I'm sorry, I think you do need a federal wage. Now, you could say that can't be high as 15 because there's some places that are, okay, we can have a discussion. But at the very least, we need to admit that it needs to be much higher than what it is. And if people work a job, they should be able to not be poor in pursuit of working that job. If you work a day's wage, if you work a day, you shouldn't be poor. That's where I'm at. Poverty is a political choice. It's a political choice. It's not an individual choice. Living wage is essential. Yes, agreed. All right, I'm going to end this. Noel Elbert, yeah. Yes, I live in Mississippi, the cheapest state to live in by far. Minimum wage here needs to double. Yeah. That's my point. That's my point. All right. Like 40 hours work week should be standard. People need to live. See, I think it should be less than 40 hours. Like, I mean, look. We get what is the purpose of life? Right? I know that's an expansive question. And maybe that's a 420 question. But I think that's an economic question to some degree. There is no point to life. There is no point to life. If somebody creates an ink pen, this thing is supposed to write. But what is the point of a human being? Who created you in this case? Oftentimes, what we consider a point of life is we just, come up with stuff. I care for my kids. I care about this particular job for whatever particular reason. I care about making this billionaire a ton of money. I care about this particular task that I'm working on because I care about the technical challenge. I care about this dog. I care about this wife. I care about this parent. Whatever. People organize their life around all sorts of things. There is no point to it at all. There is no cosmic God that looks at the crackhead and says that guy is worse than the stockbroker. There is no cosmic choice in this. You choose. You choose. Now, there are some things that are more productive than others. Do not misunderstand me. If you're working in coordination to build something that's going to feed 1,000 people, I think that's more productive than somebody sniffing coke. Just saying. You can make qualitative judgments of what is more productive in the context of trying to get XYZ accomplished, but in the grand sense of point, there isn't one. I say that for a very particular reason. We spend our lives toiling away. Toiling away. Why? Oftentimes it's just to make somebody else rich. It's one thing if we're toiling away with this notion of human wellness, the goal being to make society better, to get society to the point where work and labor become less and less and less because we automate technological achievement and continuously change our society to accommodate the new technological advances. We don't do that. Any advance has to come with somebody getting rich off of that advance, meaning your society is always held back based on some plutocrat or based on the rich I mean, you're always held back on whether or not you can get things accomplished because somebody has to get rich in anything that you have to get accomplished. Want to get rid of homelessness? Can somebody get rich off of it? Nope. Then we don't want to get rid of homelessness. It's going to stay where it is. Hey, can we do something about all this cool debt? I mean, do we really need to pay people to go? I mean, do we really have to charge people $50,000 to go to school? Is that going to take money out the pockets of the banks? Yes. Then yes, we need to charge those people $50,000. Society gets so accustomed to the way society is that they look at it as if this is the way it was. This is what's right. There is no right. There is no wrong. It just is. Question is, what is the cause and effect, and what do you want to accomplish for your society? What do you want your government, your world, your society to look like? And how do you get it to look that way? What is the point? What is the point that you want to make? Is there a larger point that your society wants to kind of go towards? Tulsi Gabbard said America is freedom. America's not freedom at all. I don't have no idea. This country locks up more people than anywhere else in the world. Can you really say that with a straight face? There is no point. You make your point. The toiling away, the spending your entire life breaking your back for somebody else's pleasure. That's not in order to ensure that there's food on the table. It's to ensure that food on the table for you, yes, is a direct. But whatever you do, the ultimate goal is profit. Whatever you're doing is secondary. Even if you are a farmer and you're getting food out of the ground, you're doing so you can feed yourself. The farming is secondary to the process, which is astonishing since all of us need food to live and money is not even real. There is enough to go around. You wouldn't know it if you looked around. Our society should not be spent toiling away. Yes, there would be work. Yes, there would be labor. And yes, society itself, there is no utopia. Meaning there is no, there's nothing that you're going to any more than there's anything that you're going back to. Everybody always looks back. Looks back to where? There's nothing to look back to. You're in a continuum. You move forward. My only point is this. We decide, in real terms, what we want our world to look like. Oftentimes we don't do that because we don't look at it in those terms. But we are making a choice whether we abdicate the choice or not. Up to this point, that choice has been to maximize the profit of several billionaires. And we've organized a system where we toil and work, not for the point of doing whatever we're doing, but more so for the point of maximizing the profit of people at the top of the income scale. Under Obama, 90% of the wealth went to the top 1%. Think about what that means. 90% of the wealth. You toil away. Think of all the people that make society work. The butchers, the bakers, the people who cut hair, the people who do the streets, the haberdashers, hell, the cops, the fire department, the people who check air quality, the people who serve your coffee, who do your restaurant, who does the city planning. Think of all the people that makes your world work. And of all the wealth that was generated from all of that labor that you accumulate all across the United States with all of these people donating their bodies, their minds to the task, the 1% sucked up 95% of the wealth. And that was under a Democrat. That was under a Democrat. Why is that right? It's not right. Now, catch of the matter is right, in this case, is oriented towards this notion of if all of this labor is being done by the individuals in this society, then that should be felt within the individuals of the society. That wealth should be with the individuals, not with just 1% of the population. And if you have a society that does that, that is grossly unfair by any measure of human fairness. Now, if you're part of the top 1%, you can say, I love the fact that the system is that way, but fortunately, there is only 1% of them. The secondary question comes to us, the rest of the population, and why the rest of the population would literally sit by and allow an expropriation of wealth of that magnitude. Even if you think capitalism is fucking lovely, do you honestly believe a system that is doing this is fair and right? And even if you believe that there is nothing corrupt in this process, why are you okay with a system that allows that much wealth to be expropriated to the top? That is a policy choice. That is not an act of God, which goes back to my original point. That's a policy choice. That's a policy choice. It makes all the sense in the world for the top 1% to have a system that allows that much wealth to be expropriated to the top 1%. But I'm talking to the 99%. That's my audience. That's my audience. My argument is eat the rich. There is this notion of lack. There is no lack. You have a system that gives a ton of wealth to the top 1%, and a system that convinces you that it's okay that that happens, and that that's the only way it can be, and that's the most natural way in the world. It's nonsense. It's propaganda. It's propaganda. All right, I'm going to end this because this video is essentially an act show and it's off the fucking rails. Like, share, subscribe. Thanks all.